Nickelodeon doesn't care about Ned's Declassified.
In a middle school full of bullies.
Who on Nickelodeon would you love to get in a boxing ring with?
Jamie Lynn Spears. Simple.
Classified school survival. Nobody's ready.
They're just passing on it. That's it.
On a YouTube channel full of nostalgia, insane video lengths, and gross amounts of cringe, Jordan Fringe, that's me, and no one else because I'm stuck in a void, try to do the impossible. Help create a video to help you get into Ned's Declassified School Survival Guide. Okay, I'm sorry. You know, I had to start off the video that way. Ned's Declassified is one of my personal favorite shows from Nickelodeon, essentially giving you what would be a live-action cartoon from its presentation, over-the-top wackiness, and situational humor so relatable that you might think that this show was a case study on your school experience, and then turned into a show without you knowing. On every level, this show tried to be different by just being itself, fully embracing the low-budget feel that it had. Every character in the show feels like a cartoon character thanks to how fleshed out their personality traits are. Evil teachers are portrayed as larger-than-life villains, and school lunches, well, they can just walk away. The full picture here using how you at this age could and just may have viewed your school experience, played up more so by your imagination. On the surface, Ned's Declassified is a quirky little show that had a nice little run. On a deeper level, it's a quirky show that emphasized the experience of navigating school and everything that comes with that, and doing so with some flair. I can't express how much of a cartoon this show feels like without it being one. So let's dig into it all today on Fringe's Declassified Content Survival Guide. Results may vary. At a core level, Ned's Declassified School Survival Guide is a show about the ups and downs of dealing with middle school through the eyes of the students going to school. While the wacky and ridiculousness come out to play to make each plot and situation told a lot more over the top for the entertainment factor, it does so in a way to play with the exaggerated perspective a kid would have. You, the viewer, assume the role of the camera, or fly on the wall, that Ned would often directly talk to when offering some advice in the form of a tip to help get you through or understand a certain thing better, usually at the expense of some, if not all of the characters not having a true conclusive answer until the end of the episode. But man, when Ned turns and looks right at you, the backtrack of the theme song starting to kick back in, and he just starts spitting some facts right in your direction, you believe him from the confidence alone. While the advice from the jump can be legitimately great with nothing to really change, what makes it special is that the events of the episode can offer you a different perspective or alternate way to understand and interpret the tips, giving more nuance than what it seems. Ned, played by Devin Werkheiser, is the every kid, someone with a good heart who wants the best for him, his friends, and those who would read the guide once it's complete. He's not this overachiever who needs to be the best or has the willing to be the best. He just wants to get by doing a decent level of hard work, but can also view things as a drag, often being lazy, so as a main character, he's fairly relatable for those who did okay to good in school while not being on either end of struggling to get by or overachieving. But thanks to his friends, he may come off as the one who can't apply himself as hard or have natural smarts since his friends both kind of fit those roles, but Ned outshines them when it comes to having charisma and a natural ability to be more outgoing in most situations. Surrounding him for his trio is Cookie, played by Daniel Curtis Lee, and Mose, played by Lindsay Shaw. Cookie is the perfect gadgetary nerd who is fairly smart on his own without technology, but heavily relies on it for his everyday to-day interactions, having a spy's level of technology built right into his Google glasses before Google would even think of making that. Seriously, these things were awesome and I think everyone wanted one. While socially he stumbles because of this, it isn't for a lack of trying, always seeing himself cooler than he is portrayed to be seen by his peers, which is great to see true confidence in action, but true cringe in execution, especially when his confidence is coming from a place of trying to fit in. He always provides a nice comic relief because of the character he is and the circumstances he often finds himself in. Most times it feels he's trying to outsmart the adults, whether it's computer lab access or hiding his sickness from the nurse, plus watching him throughout the show find a liking to Lisa Zemo and how their relationship ends up cooking. He's just an interesting character the whole way through, which is something I just love about this trio. And for Mose, well, she's more of a tryhard, always having this competitive edge nature in almost anything she is doing, from academics to athletics. Despite how good or bad she ends up being at anything, it's not for a lack of trying. But she also lacks confidence in certain social fields about how she's seen or compared to other girls in the school, or to truly show her affection towards her crushes, but will be quick to be competitive in conversation as a solid defense for herself. She doesn't open up to her friends as easy as that would sound, which leads to her own stories and plot points to figure things out for herself or find guidance in the school faculty. She tries to work harder than most to get the best results, and because of everything I just stated, all three characters here have a fair share of shared traits, but are also distinctively different, so the redundancies don't truly clash here because of smaller overlaps. As I'll go into, the show I feel is genuinely written with a lot of heart and truth in it, as we break down the student-teacher dynamic. But what makes this show special for me is that it is inherently good-natured, and it's not afraid to embrace the goofiness of childhood wonder in school and how you see things at that age, how you interpret the world around you. And for the most part, as a kid, your life is majority school, so having this show, minus some special moments here and there, being set only within the walls and direct school grounds around it, it really sets the tone that we aren't worried about home life. We don't deep dive into the parents. We don't look into the struggles of getting up early, and we don't see the friendships or other school relationships blossom anywhere else aside from James K. Polk Middle School, which is named after the 11th President of the United States. But what started Ned on his journey to be a curator of the guide? Why is this seemingly average student the one to offer up advice through how he sees school for others to hopefully read and take away valuable lessons from?
Sunday night on the brand new Nick show, Ned's Declassified School Survival Guide. Only on Nick.
Aside from the tips being a mixed bag of definitive truths that I feel anyone can universally agree on, and some that are just very up to the end user if it applies to them and can help them in any way, Ned always has his eye out for his personal struggles and his friends' struggles to truly drudge out these moments of looking at you from the screen with that, "Hey, we've all been here before, right?" look. As one time he walked into the wrong restroom in kindergarten, and from that embarrassment he vowed to help make sure others don't have to feel scared or embarrassed about everything that happens and could happen throughout their time in school. So from then on, the guide was born, and now we see how it really plays out in the middle of your school journey, with that being here in middle school. But in a show about surviving school, the tips would be pretty important, right? So let's take a look at some of them. Each episode is full of multiple tips as to not just heavily focus on one, as each main situation can call for multiple different tips in general. Some tips will also act like smaller add-on bonus tips that represent a point being made, and now we go through other examples or extensions of that point. For the start of the show, we really get a baseline walkthrough of things to do for the guide, but none of them truly being a full standalone labeled tip. Most of it is general first day of school things like don't be nervous and be yourself, as well as some personal tips about the statement that your clothes make on day one, which is pretty relatable, but a big tip being getting a haircut 2 weeks early for the sake of giving your new do some time to grow into itself. Now, clearly some things here are base level, like of course being on your best behavior, but I do like that there is a mention of the statement that you make based on your outfit. It helps set a tone for you as a person, your interests, just your whole vibe in general. Now, for real though, the way you dress has no bearing on who you actually are, especially to an extent that should truly matter. But as a kid, I personally remember how much your outfit, especially on the first days of every school year, made an actual difference. I look back at it now as something so silly, and as an adult I've always strived to dress decently for events or going out, but most days I dress in a hoodie and sweats because it's comfortable. So as superficial as this tip may sound in hindsight, I feel like it genuinely had an effect on how your peers viewed you back then, which sucks, but it really is what it was. And there's a bunch of first day stuff in this episode that offers you a real look into being prepared and keeping your stuff together. Further episodes in season 1 deal with getting to your locker and to the next class in time, when are the ideal times to hit the restroom, picking the best project partner and how not to be stuck doing all the work or you not doing that to someone else. If we look into some of the tips about the teachers, one of them being don't kiss up, do the work, it really sets a level that the show knows when to give some real solid advice that isn't just for fun, playful, or bare minimum baseline common knowledge. The full statement being, I know it doesn't feel like it, but teachers are people too. And if you just do the work, or at least try in class, you'll be amazed how much your grades shoot up, which I personally think is a fairly great tip. If you're athletic and want to get into school sports, they focus on what it takes to make the cut and how to navigate not making the team. So we have general life tips, We have school-based tips, and of course, there are relationship tips too. At a time in your life when you're more likely to start being interested in others, developing full-on crushes, and even dating, the show gives you perspectives from crushes that like someone but the other person doesn't like them back, or having a crush on someone else, what it feels like to like someone that is considered out of your league, and even the unknown where you're not sure if the person you like has any feelings towards you. I appreciate that the show has a fair balance of not playing too heavily into the relationship stuff in a way that feels forced or overbearing, but rather kept it natural, often weaving it in and out of other storylines or brief mentions for continuity, making it feel true to life with that being a major focus some kids would have, again, especially at that time, but it just weaves it in and out rather than it being your everything. The show would also tackle rumors in a way of how it feels like to be on the receiving end of one, and the guilt that can come for being a part of its spreading, which I think is valuable to a viewer who at the time is or has experienced this no matter what side of it they're on, to help get through it, because at the end of the day, you know who you are, or for some introspection and self-realization of the type of person you want to be in life. While some of this may seem surface level on the show, or shown in a way that is way more lighthearted than serious, it still is able to reach you on a different level that lets you put the puzzle pieces together rather than show the severity. We have tips focusing on things like backpacks that add some good advice like just keeping it clean and not too overstuffed, but also some more goofier things, as backpacks in school were surely not treated as this massive statement that the show likes to make it. And unless you had one of those rolling ones that dragged around you in the school, acting as if you're at an airport, trust me, you were definitely being judged. Not by me, of course, I would never. Speaking of that, bullies were another reoccurring topic, but mainly for comedic relief or plot progression. But there are specific moments of tips and notes with how to deal with these situations, offering different ways in handling it all. So while I feel some of these are pretty solid, these are not the end-all be-all for your personal problems. I feel like everyone's situation with this subject was different growing up, so tips like if you know their schedule, you can avoid them seem a little silly, as if every student would have the means to perform espionage on their bullies, master their schedule and avoid them, because some may just be in your class, some may just be on your same bus, and some are just going to be someone no matter what you can't avoid. So again, the show was not the end-all be-all definitive way to live your life by at the time if you grew up with it, and if it applied closer to where you were in school. While I look back on all of these tips, I do see a lot of genuine ways that the show was able to relate to a majority of kids out there, as well as provide clear entertainment in moments that you're not meant to truly follow. So in saying that, I think what the show set out to do in many ways actually works in becoming a mostly common sense, sometimes introspective guide that you could have taken a lot away from. The show offered plenty of addendums to tips that could give multiple perspectives or expansions on what to do, which is great for not being all one tip fits all, but that's all they are at the end of the day. Just tips, not rules. So you don't have to look at this show as A plus B equals C. You can explore the alphabet in a way you see fit and really use the guide as a reference piece to guide you where you naturally will get yourself, which I give a lot of credit to how well this show was handled at a conception level. Ned's Declassified was created by Scott Fellows, a very interesting show creator and producer, known for also going on to create Johnny Test and Big Time Rush, two other shows that couldn't be more different but also very similar in a lot of ways. One connection you'll find between these works from Scott is the sound effects relating to movement and facial reactions to help emphasize a point.
Do you, Jennifer and Mosley?
I don't. I do.
I lost a baby! Baby gone!
Okay.
It helps make both of his live action shows here feel a lot more like a real life version of a cartoon, and make his cartoon feel like, well, let's just say there's a lot of whip cracks in it.
I dare you! You are not. Okay. 100. You sprayed him with your bear. Episode 9 and now.
But regardless, three distinctly different shows that carry some creative similarities, but all had massive impacts in the spaces and eras they came out in, each of them truly feeling like a different show from the last. But I think the most important thing that was able to be done with a show like this is that it feels completely unique. Nothing else in the genre of school-related drama, sitcom, or anything else you'd want to classify had a vibe that could match Ned's Declassified. In a field for kids television, shows that focused on kids' lives where a large portion of the different stories told are within the walls of a school, Ned's chose to be different in the best ways possible. We don't leave to focus on their home, as the school acts as the place where we spend most of our time anyway, so we just rarely leave the direct premises. The plot's ups and downs don't exactly follow a more drawn-out, traditional up and down formula for its rising or falling action or climax. Playing more into the cartoony nature of things, the show has 2 segments per episode, so roughly every conflict, situation, and tips given are done so in about 11 minutes each, making it a fast-paced experience, much like the opposite of school in real life. Scott is a cartoon curator at heart.
Hey, Johnny Scott, right now it's time to test your bathroom skills and accuracy.
I'm throwing toilet paper?
160 points.
I gotta say, Johnny, this is like one of the best times I've ever had in the bathroom.
We'll be right back with more Scott Fellows.
Before we even get to him working on Johnny Test, he's been a head writer on The Fairly Odd Parents, which is A, why they appear in a special episode on the show, and B, why his live-action efforts have the energy of a cartoon, knowing how to translate the formula into a live-action space. You can relate to the school and the people in it, but also have this complete separation and acceptance of the wackiness that takes place. The show wasn't looking to reinvent the school sitcom, but it did find a way to do something fresh within the crowded space. It stood out well enough from the other shows around it, and I feel that that is such a testament to why I, and so many others, hold it in such high regards, and look back on it with such fondness. I can't reiterate enough how crucial the characters in this show are to making all of this work as well as it did, with each character feeling like they were perfectly casted. Funny enough though, the character of Cookie was originally going to be named Boogie, as well as played by a different actor, Stephen Markarian, aka Jerry from Drew and Jerry, the Drake and Josh side characters that had their own little fake TV show as a joke in a great episode of Drake and Josh. And once again, I have a big Drake and Josh video in the works and I'm very excited to talk about it, so stick around for that. But this version here with Boogie was only in the original pilot, where when they came back and reshot the pilot, the other actor went on to play a different role on the show, going from one of the main leads to the side character of Albert Wermenheimer, as Daniel was given the role of one of the leads, and the character was changed up a bit and turned into Cookie. Another casting fun fact is that before Lisa Zemo was played by Rachel Sibner, none other than the singer and actress JoJo had the role and played it in the pilot, which is just another role that JoJo was up for and moved on from. Around the same time, when Hannah Montana was in the works, she apparently had that role offered to her as well, and I just find all of that interesting. And of course, in the development of any show, things change, and something that would have been completely different would have been Coconut Head. Aside from him basically only being called that throughout the show, this was a wig he was wearing the entire time. But can you imagine if this bull haircut wasn't there and he didn't have a universally agreed upon nickname? Well, originally his hair was going to be spiky and on the short side, but that was later changed into the iconic look he had throughout the show. Heck, there was almost a storyline that focused on him getting a haircut to fit in or feel cooler, and I'm guessing this was in the efforts of what the third season was doing with a few characters, representing them going through their own growth from the start of the series to the end, which I think was handled real well. Which brings us to the end of the series. Where does a show that focused on a group of kids in middle school go from here? Well, just like middle school, 3 seasons equaled 3 years. So the main show itself was going to come to an end. And while there is more to what could happen after, we will get to that in just a bit. The ending of the show was slated as a double episode length event and called Survival Guide of Field Tips, Permission Slips, Signs, and Weasels. Yeah, there's a lot going on here. But there is mainly one aspect I want to focus on here at the end of the show. Aside from the fact that this special takes place majority of the time outside of the school and instead at the Huffington Gardens and Gallery, this would help send off our trio into the unknown of what's next for them in high school after the summer. But we reach a point with the characters of Ned and Mose that really cemented their friendship and all of the awkward tension that gets in between them whenever things get into a more flirtatious territory, as Ned struggles with his ultimate crush of Susie and realizing that all this time he may have truly been in love with his best friend Mose, bringing back in a hard final stamp for the relationship arcs in the show, while still delivering on a finale that focuses on all of the right characters it needed to. Plus, the school is basically a destroyed mess by the end of it, and what's more satisfying than that? Now, I believe middle school isn't really a thing all around the world, but in general, for those who did have a 3-stage school separation with elementary, middle, and high, middle school was a very interesting bridge between the extremes of elementary and high school. It felt both necessary and unnecessary at the same time, as the 6th grader you enter as is not the 8th grader you leave it. Those 3 years, usually consisting of the preteen era in your life, are crucial in starting to develop who you truly will become, and help start to put things in perspective a lot more for yourself. So overall, Ned's Declassified worked for someone like me at the time when it came out. But how was it received then without nostalgia goggles on nowadays? This show was received pretty well all around, heralded by some as one of the best shows on television for its demographic at the time. The show ended in style with a solid conclusion and a marathon of episodes that were picked by the cast as their favorite moments from the series. 3 years delivered 3 solid seasons that filled us with a lot of laughs and a lot of heart that made it something truly special. What I can see even more so as an adult when looking back was not lost on those who reviewed it then, understanding that this show was different from the rest. It was unique. It wasn't afraid to be different, and it always had something to say, even if that something was a little silly sometimes. It's all in a good-natured way, as the show was able to depict school as a bright and enjoyable environment that you'd still want to be at, despite the over-exaggerated emphasis on the bad, or at least what you internalized and interpreted as bad, or what you deemed as a drag to get through. Either way, high praise and positive support from the viewers really made this show the nostalgia-driven memory it is today. But ending it after 3 seasons seemed like the smart thing to do, but also a missed opportunity. I call it a missed opportunity due to the places the show could have gone post-middle school and even beyond past high school. But we'll get into that momentarily. I say it's a smart thing to do as to not run the risk of ruining how good these 3 seasons were. We completed a journey that took us through these 3 years of school that finished us on an open end of where this group is off to next, but feeling fulfilled with their time at James K. Polk Middle School. So while more would have definitely been fun, I am grateful for what we did have in the end. When Ned's Declassified premiered, it almost had 1 million eyes tuning in for the first time, which sounds great when said alone, but compared to other hit shows on the network, there was a lot of space to grow to be considered a strong hit. Despite how much praise and high ratings the show can get, words don't really pay the bills to keep the lights on for a show. But as word spread about Ned's Declassified, more and more people gave it a chance. Plus, headlines or statements proclaiming the show as a good time only helped it out in general. So it never really needed to compete at the heights of some of the other shows. It was really good at being consistent in delivering what the audience would tune in for, and in doing so, locking in an assurance from the viewer that they'll be back for the next episode, or just be willing to tune in to marathons or reruns of episodes. In the end, the finale for the show premiered as a special 2-parter episode for Ned Shred Weekend, that also included the premiere of Devin's TV movie for Nickelodeon, Shredder Man Rules.
Loser. Take that, sucker!
The show basically ended more so for what it wasn't, a machine that can turn what it is into a scalable IP for the network. And the fact that every few years or so, shows that aren't on the level as some of the giants out there only get a few seasons or less before the attention span of the current demographic is aged out of the property anyway. It's an unfortunate reality that only benefits the corporations. But there is just so much to love about this show, so much to look back on and discuss, as well as look into the possible futures it was trying to actively find, and what future it did find to stay relevant and live on in a new way today.
Batteries and cream.
Fixer upper, but you're not gonna have any stinky neighbors in here, huh? Weasel! Get out of here!
I think Ned's Declassified School Survival Guide is overall just an incredible show that offers me a lot of retrospect now when watching it to my times in middle school growing up. There are countless episodes that I've seen dozens and dozens of times and can quote direct moments that truly made me laugh, or tips I think that are pretty cool to explore in the show. Even though I would have loved to see more from the show, continuing on to their high school adventures, I think where the show left us at was a pretty great point. We've finished middle school and we've achieved the end goal of these characters specifically for their time in middle school, as we now know that they have a larger journey just on their horizon. Episodes like Procrastination having the la 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 la, Ned's running out of time song playing over a montage of time passing burned into my brain has factually given me something that affects my day to day. Every instance of me running thin on time, all I hear is that song in my brain to get me through whatever task I'm currently doing. Or even when the sportscasters come on the screen as the joke turns the major situation going on into commentary of the event. It's just pure cartoony story boundary breaking fun. Even Matt Hoffman bikes it up in the show, and I find that pretty cool.
Hey, Cookie. Matt Hoffman.
The consistent highlights of our main trio and the supporting cast created a constantly funny, well-written, and skillfully crafted show that gave us a stylized take on kids trying to navigate part of their school life. It has this homegrown look and feel to it, all thanks to how the show is edited, with the special effects being a blend of practical and some basic CGI. So it just fits into that mid-2000s, you could probably make this yourself too feel, truly help emphasizing the kids' perspective of it all, along with a bright color palette allowing allowing it to look very poppy and more naturally lit than it was, giving the setting a more welcomed environment feel. Something that I truly loved about the show was how the tips were handled. Like I said, throughout the show, Ned would speak directly to the camera to give a tip about whatever situation was going to be tackled this episode, with an additional tip or tip add-ons during the runtime. But more importantly, the rollbacks. Not every tip worked or was universal enough to fit everyone's situation, adding more nuance to the show and how it's written. There were struggles to navigate, and as the characters did, the tips sometimes needed to be changed or have an added addendum that would tweak things into making more sense. It also worked in showcasing that Ned himself doesn't have everything figured out. He often relies on previous world knowledge to come up with the tip and how he thinks it should be, but thanks to having some of his own real experiences after this, or seeing his friends going through their own situations, these viewpoints change and morph because they made them so malleable through the viewpoint of a kid in middle school. It played the main three as real as possible when it comes to dealing with the situations for the first time that build them into who they are before they eventually end their time in middle school and have to learn a whole new set of life and social skills in high school. And I also mentioned this earlier, but the show mixes in those real and true moments with the outer wrapping of pure cartoon-esque comedy. From the constant use of sound effects to emphasize the facial expressions or fast camera movements, to the over-exaggerated moments of how everyday going to school moments can be viewed as a kid, especially one with a wild imagination. The teachers all have their own quirks that become their whole personality, pulling off an on-purpose flanderization in the effort of making them feel exactly like the role they're meant to play and how the students see them, with only fragmented moments of them not falling into those categories breaking this illusion. The same can be said for some of the kids as well outside of the main trio. They all usually play into a cartoony version of who their character is supposed to be like. While some of them get moments beyond that to break this, for the majority of the time, what you see is what you get. Billy Loomer is a bully who is overcompensating for his lack of knowledge, as well as struggling with his love for Mose. Backpack Boy has the perfect over-the-top backpack for any occasion, often used for a quick gag. Seth Powers is another character who's low on IQ but high on being able to spin a basketball on his finger, keeping up this extremely happy personality regardless if he's talking down to you or missing out on context clues in conversation, as he comes off as that he feels like he is the smart one in some ways. Lisa Zemo, for a majority of the show, is this ultra nerdy, mostly quiet and sickly gross person up until she gets this transformation, which really was just the whole taking off the glasses, styling up the hair a bit, making the character's face less pale with makeup thing, and she's one of the only side characters that has this full-on change in character visually, aside from just growing up over the 3 years for middle school. While we could sit here for hours and dissect every character in the show for the way that they're portrayed, this whole cartoon factor was huge in making the show have a style all its own. It was silly and it knew exactly what it wanted to be, never taking itself too seriously, but never having the more ridiculous moments just feel stupid. Everything always was in favor of aiding in a tip or adding visual representation to what is happening in the moment. A lot of this comes from the most legendary custodian in television, the janitor of the school, Gordy, who is brilliantly portrayed by Dean Norris, giving the show an adult who acts more so like a kid when it comes to random shenanigans or helping them out with whatever they all have going on. All at the same time, he has this unbeatable rivalry with a weasel, who constantly outsmarts Gordy every time the two have a battle within the walls of the school. In the end, it does truly pay off their rivalry, as we learn that the weasel was pregnant and gives birth, and now the new school mascot becomes the weasel. Was there any real reason for this whole side arc throughout the show? No, not at all. But was it always fun to see Gordy outplayed by a weasel, all for it to end in a truly happy way? You betcha it was. I know we talked about the end already, but I really wanted to note that throughout the entire show, we see all three of the main trio navigate the dating world, having their own crushes, dates, heartbreaks, and more. But what was always building up slowly throughout the show was the relationship between Ned and Mose. With how close their relationship was, and how we've seen them go through their own personal experiences with relationships so far, they find a romance in each other by the end of it all. In real life, Devin and Lindsay did actually date for a while. As posted on the Nick Rewind YouTube channel on September 4th, 2021, Devin and Lindsay played a game called Real vs. Rewind, where the two would answer questions and decide if they do or don't really want to go into the topics given, especially as they focused heavily on behind-the-scenes moments or background context for the show.
Let's play this game.
Now, Devin had made a comment back in 2019 on the same channel for a different interview-esque show called Throwback, hosted by Anthony Padilla from previously Smosh and now his own channel fame, going on to say that they ended up dating after the show ended for a year and calling her her his first love.
Lindsay Shaw, what's the first thing you think of?
Love her. She was like my first love, man.
Together on that other video though, the two discussed their relationship, with Lindsay calling back to the start of the production sometime after the callbacks happened.
I liked Devin from that first time I saw him on the round callback thing.
Where she started developing a crush on Devin, where it was already becoming clear that Devin also had a crush back, as throughout the 3 seasons we see their relationship growing in the show closer and closer, leading up to the final moments of them becoming an item on the show. But Lindsay fills us into the fact that it wasn't after the show they started dating, but kind of towards the end of season 3, as at one moment when the two of them were not on camera or not acting, shared a kiss and then became an item.
And we kissed as Lindsay and Devin.
It was beautiful.
So that authenticity of the sparks between them in the show was always real and became even more real later on. They even see this all as the show being a parallel to their relationship and how it all progressed.
Oh my gosh, it's paralleling our actual lives.
They ended up breaking up mutually after this being their first time in a relationship with feelings of love, and their careers were starting to separate them. So in a natural way, things ended.
I don't think I want to talk about any of that.
Why did we break up, Devin?
And while they both play coy about the whole breakup, things seem to have ended fine, as when asked if they date again, she doesn't even hesitate to say yes, and it looks like Devin is open to it.
Yes.
Cool.
But I'm not here to understand their personal relationship to one another in real life. I just think it was interesting because of how real it felt on the show was because of how real it was in real life. Some more of my favorite moments from the show are these little reoccurring character moments we get from both students and teachers. I think Coconut Head here is just a classic because we all knew a coconut head both in hairstyle and in personality. Susie Crabgrass was interesting to watch grow from this unattainable achievement of even asking out for Ned into this later on love interest. And then she went on to be in The Walking Dead, so that was fun to see. Oh, and Missy being this popular girl who was just over the top conceited and mean, but then has this whole crush on Ned. Seriously, by the end of this show, Ned went from the small, not very popular kid to a real ladies' man, it seemed. Scoop Kid always gets his scoop. He was a little fun, smaller character that just popped around here and there. Fame and Fortune. Yes, this is how this name is supposed to be sounded out, like Fame and Fortune. He was this other character aside from Seth that Mose had a crush on, and even dated later on in the show before he ended up moving away to play pro soccer in Brazil, which just kind of reminds me of all the kids that would move away in real life and pretend that they're moving for some unbelievable reason. And this certainly would sound like one. Ah, yes, the middle schooler who looks like a lot older than he is totally moving away to go play pro soccer. Yeah, sure. Martin Quirley is that one kid who would never shut up about anything, but he's extremely smart and overall he's a kind soul. Claire Sawyer, the soon-to-be lawyer, would always appear whenever needed, and is the example of that one kid who always knew what they wanted to be and what they wanted to do in life. Maybe taking it a bit too serious, a bit young, but regardless, we stand a person with a plan. And funny enough, after the show, the actress who played Claire, Brooke Marie Bridges, would pursue a real career in law, but didn't continue on this path because of what the student debt would come out to be. But she did retain valuable knowledge from her time studying that helped her win an actual case to get money from an employer who never paid her. So I call that a pretty big win. Timmy Toot Toot, well, that's just self-explanatory on why this character is so memorable. But aside from the rest of the kid cast doing a great job with many other reoccurring roles from great characters, the teachers are also extremely memorable. Mr. Monroe is a kind soul with a darker bullying past, which is funny based on how his personality is as an adult. But what I, and probably a lot of others, remember him most for was when he had Cookie and Ned be project partners acting as parents to a fake baby.
You two will be the alternative family. Here's your baby.
It's a classic episode that really helps set the tone of the show to come. Mr. Wright, the school's eventual principal, starts off as this social studies teacher, usually offering the most open lines of communication with his students, but is also often seen as boring and a pushover. But we get this heavily contrasted with Vice Principal Krubbs, who is this over-the-top, self-deemingly demands a level of respect guy that comes off more cop than education administrator. Mr. Quest is a personal shout-out one for me, as I really enjoy the episode School Clubs, where it has him trying to persuade students to sign up for the school club that he runs called Gamers Club, and eventually he is able to convince Mose and Susie to join up, and everyone in the group is surprised they did. He's a guy who likes to banish people from the computer lab for a number of days determined by his dice, and I think that's great. There's Mr. Chopsaw, who becomes a close figure for Mose to look up to, and for him to be completely mangled constantly in his class. At least this truly shows us not to play around, and to always wear safety equipment in woodshop. And is this like an average class that people still have to take, because I remember having woodshop at one point. Anyway, there's Mr. Comb-Over. I think I had nightmares about this guy, so I wanted to just admit that on the internet for some reason. And there's even iTeacher, who is just a teacher teaching through a computer monitor, which all teachers kind of became this for a couple years recently. Coach Joy is mostly portrayed as this hard-on students coach, but does have more memorable moments with how she interacts with her students that I enjoyed her approach to be more personable with them. But of course, there's Mr. Sweeney, being portrayed as the evil teacher who seems to like putting pressure on these kids, but at the same time wants to see them grow and do well, and is even shown to be proud sometimes. But he plays such a great evil science teacher antagonist role that always turns those episodes into a more dramatic situation. And that's also the beauty of the teachers here as well. They're not only added conflict and challenges for the most part, they also offered true heart-to-heart moments with the kids, helping them grow and learn and just understand where they're coming from sometimes. Even the meanest, cruelest, and downright despicable teachers out there were shown a moment or two of why they are teachers in the first place. The show didn't try to demonize teachers. They at first play it that the teachers here can be awful and suck, but by the end of some episodes, the teachers would be shown to break out of their character sometimes that the kid would overplay them out to be in their heads for our viewer perception. And I think that it was masterfully done, and it humanizes the struggles that teachers have but aren't supposed to show in front of their students. The episode I think back to most of the time is probably the most known one. I even made a standalone video on it at one point years ago, but it's the one where they had the Fairly OddParents cameo in a daydream sequence.
How about we help out Secret Agent Ned?
Which is just nice to see because Cosmo is voiced by Darren Norris, which as a kid, this was a fun connection to make. Rarely I felt we would get too many looks into who the voice actors are behind some of these characters unless they were a massive celebrity, not usually known for voice acting. So it's just something I thought was neat. As well as Scott Fellows being a head writer for the Fairly OddParents, it just seems like a smart fit and an easy combination to put together. The episode though really focused on daydreaming and how it could be both seen by others in a negative light while held up in a positive one to help escape from the world for a moment, or even help you in truly figuring something out as you zone out. Which is an interesting thing to dig into all of its own and why I looked so deep into this episode in the past, but I just love how Ned is able to solve this riddle so all of the kids can go out to lunch and get some pizza. I also love the imaginative nature of it. Viewing yourself as this action spy who gets to be driven in a car through the hallways of the school only to be assisted by none other than Cosmo and Wanda as Ned figures everything out to save the class from this evil captor, Sweeney, who at the end of the day really just wanted them all to truly learn something. Speaking of learning something, what if there was a way to have more Neds Declassified?
Limited edition Shrek Easy Squirt Pop. That's Chuck.
Ned's Declassified School Survival Guide, a brand new Nick show. Your Neducation begins next. Your Neducation continues.
All three of the main cast went on to go their separate ways with their careers. Daniel would end up for over 70 episodes in the show Zeke and Luther, finding some acting work beyond this in stuff like Glee and 911, as he would also start dabbling into writing and directing. Lindsay would also continue on acting, even voicing the character of Trip in one of my favorite overlooked games from 2010, Enslaved: Odyssey to the West, and finding her biggest role later on with over 40 episodes for the show Pretty Little Liars. Devin, well, he would start walking in two worlds, where he would begin to heavily focus on his music, which is something he still kinda does, dropping a bunch of singles here and there with his first EP releasing in 2013 and his most recent one in 2020, but he still played around in the acting space. And at first, with it still being Nickelodeon, where he would star as the lead in Shredder Man Rules, a movie that I would like to talk about at some point on this channel, so let me know if you'd want to see that. He would also release the song Superhero for Shredder Man Rules as a nice connection for his music career. Beyond this, he would continue on with small roles in television, both in the live action and animated sense, as well as appearing in over a dozen movies, with his latest being the film Rust, which was put into the spotlight on October 21st, 2021, when a prop revolver wasn't checked properly, resulting in the death of Helena Hutchins, the film's cinematographer. May she rest in peace. In between everyone's work over the past 15 years since the show, there were some moments that almost led, or at least were trying to lead, to the continuation of Ned's Declassified. In June of 2008, a year after Ned's came to an end, Devin posted some life updates on his personal blog talking about his music and just catching up with his life in general. But there was something mentioned that seemed pretty interesting that pertained directly to Ned's, and that was Devin saying that he signed a development deal with Nickelodeon for them to work together on creating a spin-off for Ned, where he would go to high school, which, yeah, that would be the natural progression of the show, as then it would go on to continue up aging with the characters and follow them on something even more terrifying than middle school. He would go on to say that this is a work in progress, and we'll know in the next couple of months if it gets greenlit. Now, clearly, those months passed, and the show never ended up coming to fruition thanks to a handful of reasons. At this time, it was becoming clear that everyone was too busy. Daniel was already starting to work on Zeke and Luther, Lindsay was already working on her role as a lead in the TV series adaptation of 10 Things I Hate About You, and heck, even the creator, Scott Fellows, was already working with Nickelodeon on a different project, one that would build its own legacy and hit boy band, Big Time Rush, leaving the show with no direction to go but just being over after its 3-season run. Things basically stayed silent about Ned's for over a decade from this point. Now, fast forwarding to the 2020s, and reboots seem to be all the rage for the nostalgia building on the generation from the 2000s. But something fun about some of these reboots is that they were more than what you could have expected. First being the big Nickelodeon one, Rugrats. I'm kidding. Though that did get a complete reboot, and I've mentioned it here on the channel before, and I have some big Rugrats videos coming later, so get ready for those. But what I'm really referring to is iCarly, where this show has come back into the spotlight in a newer way, becoming a show for those who grew up with the original, as Carly and company are now in their adult lives dealing with a more modern world, and there's even bad language, and Josh Peck. So overall, it's a fun time. It has some issues in which I've well documented the past few years on the channel, but it hasn't been a disaster. This was definitely sparking people's hope for so many other shows to come back in a more adult way, as iCarly has been a massive success for Paramount+. So now we look on to TikTok, where everyone, their mother, and their pet has an account, as well as any celebrity you can think of. So that's where we find Devin, who on May 14th, 2021, posted a video where he was answering the question of is there going to be a reboot or continuation of Ned's Declassified. This comes after a lot of his posts were trying to get people nostalgic about Ned, whether it was clips from the show, referencing the show with actual tips from Devin himself, or even showing that now as an adult, he's around Nickelodeon Studios.
Hi TikTok, quick story time.
The video he posted starts off with him saying that for the past 2 years, he's been trying to develop and pitch to the studio a Ned's Declassified adulthood survival guide.
The Ned's Declassified adulthood survival guide reboot.
Very much in the same vein of growing up with the audience. The premise of the show would feature the trio, now out of college and in their 20s, dealing with the terrible day-to-day adult situations we can all pretty much relate to, from taxes to the world of online dating and much more, providing you tips just like back in middle school about how to navigate all of this. Which on paper, yes, this is exactly the show that should come from the original premise, with the original trio returning and the original creator Scott, returning as well. It was labeled a self-help sitcom for someone who could use a friend, which I think is the most wholesome thing I've ever heard. Unfortunately, the network doesn't care about that. Along with no one owning the rights to the Ned's Declassified IP aside from Nickelodeon, Devin and the rest of those on board would have to pitch the idea to Nickelodeon and Awesomeness TV in hopes that they'd be into it, or find a way to have them sell the IP to them so they can go make it themselves and bring it to another studio. So right then and there, after all of this work, getting everyone on board to come back, the potential revival of the show was officially dead, leaving us with a sad and disappointed Devin. But over time, this video went extremely viral, with over 4 million views and nearly 1 million likes on it. There clearly were a lot of fans of the show coming out of hiding to show their love for the idea and the original show in general. Later on, in February of 2023, we would hear Devin, Lindsay, and Daniel speak about this with Christy Carlson Romano of Disney Channel fame, and we'll touch back on her importance in relationship to Ned's current conversation in the zeitgeist in just a moment. But this podcast took place shortly after the announcement that another classic Nickelodeon show was getting a revival, with Zoey 101 coming back with Zoey 102 sometime later this year. When discussing this, we get to hear about how Devin and Scott were the two who pitched the idea fully to Nickelodeon, and claimed it was such a great pitch. Now, of course, anyone is going to say that about their own stuff, but based on what we've been told about this, the idea of the show in general, it sounded extremely strong. So now with iCarly back and doing well and Zoey 101 coming back, why was Ned's Declassified left without a chance for a revival? Especially when the show had pretty favorable ratings from back in the day, the clear modern day excitement of nostalgia from the 2000s, and the full team willing to come back together. Devin simply put, they don't want it, or at least they don't want it right now.
Pitched such a great
Oh,
pitch.
Yeah.
They don't want it. Or they don't want it right now. It was like
Great pitch. Nope.
They called it a great pitch, but were passive in saying nope, not right now. Clearly though, Nickelodeon didn't want to let go of the IP as they tabled it and held on to what was said in the pitch. They kept the rights to the IP and moved everyone on their way.
Not right. We're gonna hold it and do nothing with it. As of now, they're just passing on it. That's it.
To make matters worse, this rejection came in the form of an email. It's just like getting broken up with over a text message. It just stings that much more.
It just felt so passive. It was an email. It was just an email. That also hurt. Ned's was the weird stepchild on Nickelodeon. I don't know. Yeah. I spiraled into deep depression because I'm gonna be real, guys. I needed it. I needed it.
This all leaves me a bit baffled when thinking back to why this pitch was denied. As remember me bringing up Devin and Lindsay being on the Nick Rewind channel? Well, along with that video posted in 2021, we saw a lot of Devin being a part of Nickelodeon Online related content for YouTube around this time, such as this video from August of 2019, where Devin offers some tips about going back to school, posted on that same channel. There were some more videos here and there that would also feature Lindsay, but what I'm trying to say is that over this 2-year time span as Devin and company were developing this reboot and in active communications to Nickelodeon and getting the chance to eventually fully pitch the idea, there seemed to be an open and seemingly fine relationship between them, as they made several Ned-related videos that racked up millions of views for them online. So I just find it a little bit odd that Nickelodeon directly had them back for some Ned behind-the-scenes content, saw the power of the fans who loved the original show, and still ended up passing on the reboot when it came down to it. I feel frustrated on behalf of Devin and everyone else who tried to put this together. And while they may see it another way as these small things they did for Nick, it just reads as bad faith tactics from Nickelodeon. Getting every ounce of viewership on nostalgia for Ned, and then not taking the chance on something that sounded truly great. So where does that leave us now? First, let's go back a little bit before the podcast they were all on with Christy. Back to a point where after a long time with no real updates as to anything happening to the property. By 2022, the actors of the 3 main characters themselves all were becoming more active online, with Devin Werkheiser and Lindsay Shaw putting themselves out there more so on platforms like TikTok, and even making podcast appearances here and there, with that podcast itch truly starting to spark something. Thanks to Devin's TikTok account constantly releasing content, with a decent bit either taking shots at Nickelodeon for not rebooting Ned's Declassified, based on how petty they treated the pitch, or talking about Ned as if more of the show continued, including a whole made-up scenario of a finale to Ned's Declassified high school survival guide, where the tip writing responsibilities get passed down to essentially a new Ned. While all in good fun it seemed, the later the year went on, we started to see more TikToks that included the main trio together, with one back in December of 2022 showing the 3 of them together on a podcast set, with the visual of Ned's Declassified podcast survival guide up on a monitor in the background. Another instance of something happening in December of 2022, Lindsay would also post something on TikTok, which was an interesting video of her that showed her with Devin and Daniel, but again, this wasn't just a reunion of friends here for the sake of it. We would get shown a screen that revealed the specific graphic saying, once again, Ned's Declassified Podcast Survival Guide. With a quick aside here, that is a great name. So mix that all together with the fact that Devin flat out replied to a TikTok calling out Zoe 101 Reboot over getting Ned's Declassified reboot, which Devin directly said, good for them, I'm just going to say it, Nickelodeon doesn't care about Ned's Declassified School Survival Guide. It's cool. We got a podcast coming out in February, check it out. All of that led everyone who has been wanting more Ned in some shape or form to be genuinely excited that these 3 were coming together to make this a reality. We just didn't know truly what to expect or what audience this would be aimed at, with most assuming that it would be for the crowd that grew up with the show more so than anything. Cut to February 2nd, 2023, and a trailer drops on a new YouTube channel of the same name of the podcast that fully gives you a taste of what the podcast would be. From the breaking down of episodes, the actors' behind the scenes experiences, what was going on at the time, and more importantly, a deeper look into these 3 actors with their perspectives from back then up until today. 3 friends that genuinely feel like friends all coming together to speak as friends. First, over the shared bond of making the show in the first place, but secondly, having more adult conversations that reflect their thoughts, allowing for interesting conversations that aren't just about the original show all by itself. Now, you may notice a few podcasts similar to Ned's Declassified kind of popping up recently as well, with stuff like the Wizards of Waverly Pod and even more Stevens. And that's all because they're all under the same podcast publisher who is helping helping put together and run these shows, Podco, the podcast company. Now, before you worry about some corporation using these things that you're nostalgic for and not delivering on those promises or letting the people on the podcast truly create the show that they wanted to make, they do.
I gotta go to the bathroom.
And I'll touch on my thoughts on the Ned's Declassified podcast in a moment to continue that, but here in the same sense of who owns and runs Podco. Its founder and CEO is Brendan Rooney, whose name might not be ringing bells for you, but his partner in crime, both for the business and in real life, is his wife, Christy Carlson Romano. Again, Disney Channel fame, best known as Ren Stevens on Even Stevens and the voice of Kim Possible, who has had a recent history of making YouTube content building bridges to the past with special guests from other shows around that time as well. She's also familiarized herself extremely well with the podcasting scene, allowing her the know-how, the connections, and the right planning to help set up this company with her husband. While Podco is relatively new, being fully established by January 2023, the shows they have created so far all feature prominent people from the respective original shows. And while there would be plenty to talk about with looking at what the company has so far, or to speculate and ponder over what they could be working on next, of course for this video we are just going to speak and look at Ned's Declassified podcast survival guide. And so after that initial trailer dropped, less than 2 weeks later on February 15th, episode 1, First Day, was released, and we get to catch up like it was the first day once again, re-meeting Devin, Daniel, and Lindsay as who they are now in life. What brings you to the podcast is that every episode takes a look at a segment from the show, in order of the release, as we get the trio going back and forth about their memories from making those episodes by discussing the actors they worked with, their time dealing with the creator of the show, digging deep into their origins with being cast in the pilot, and then for the real show after being picked up, as well as just overall whatever happened on and off set at the time. But what you might end up staying for is how adult it all feels. Not only does it feel like good friends reminiscing about some good times, but we learn a lot about who these people are now, who they grew up to be, the troubles that they faced during and after the show in their personal and professional lives. It turns from a podcast solely about the show and quickly turns into 3 very interesting people who have gained a lot of world experience post Ned's Declassified. At first, this may take you by surprise, but as a fan who has listened for the past couple months, it really breaks down into real people who aren't just looking to revive the fan base of the original show, but a look into what it was like to be a child actor, how it worked in the Nickelodeon space, and what happened after. The stories they share episode to episode get into some pretty deep topics that don't paint the best of times, from addiction to arrests to not feeling like you belong or what direction your life is heading. For any creatives in any form of the industry, whether you strive to be someone in Hollywood, someone online, or someone in your local personal spaces, there is a lot to take away from here that is worth listening to from 3 kids that all had their own experiences they had to learn and deal with while growing up. Expectations being shattered, dreams being crushed, and self-doubt offer a level of relatability to the listener similar to how the original show did to the viewer back then. I for one do appreciate that they spend time reflecting on all of the good times, but as well as all of the bad times. And they never treat you, the listener, as someone on the outside or someone that is being talked down to. You feel very involved in the moment, and it's pretty raw and laid all out there for you. Now, will this podcast go beyond the length of covering every segment from the show? Who knows? Hey, Future Jordan here. As I was finishing up this video, the Ned's podcast dropped episode 12, which was not focused on any episode from the show, but rather digging into viewer-submitted questions and topics. So I guess they are branching out earlier than I thought to try the podcast without the start of it initially revolving around an episode. So if going forward this continues where every handful of episodes we break into a different formula like this, I think that could be pretty fun. Okay, back to the video. They still have quite a while to go to even get to that point, but I do think that these 3 work just as well together as they did when they were acting together. If you haven't given this podcast a listen, check out their YouTube channel, which is just the full name of the podcast, where you can catch up on all of the episodes really quick, with each one being about 45 minutes. So for a podcast that is fairly short, but it leaves you wanting more and wanting to come back the next week to hear the next episode. Equal parts an interesting look into the production of the show, as well as everything behind the scenes, and nice deep conversations from people who've experienced a lot on their own since the show ended over 15 years ago. In the end, for what the show was, it genuinely made an impact on me growing up. As time has gone on and I look back on this show, I always find myself enjoying it more and more. While the tips these days don't always apply to me as an adult now, the way in which these stories are told have such a real relatability about them, allowing the cartoony nature that the show has to feel so natural and lived in. I do wish that there was some sort of continuation or reboot, whether it would have been them going to high school for a high school survival guide, or the other route of having an adult reboot similar to iCarly's reboot for Paramount+. I think there is a lot of fun in the concept here on its own that truly could work, and who knows, maybe one day this will happen. Even more so now, thanks to their podcast together, building up so much hype, as well as a perfect bridge of why the original show was so special. But regardless, it's just nice to listen to these actors and where they're at now in their lives. With the podcast they have growing and growing week after week, this next year will be quite telling in the efforts to get not just more ears on board with the show, but specifically the right ears that can actually make it happen. So here's to Ned's Declassified Adult Survival Guide being a reality at some point. Would you like to see that actually happen? Let me know in the comments below. Also, let me know your thoughts on Ned's Declassified in general. What were some of your favorite moments or episodes? Anyways, thanks so much for watching. Like and subscribe for more. Later. In a way, with this podcast, I guess we kind of are getting that Ned's Declassified Adulthood Survival Guide.